Well, bibbity bobbity boo, look at that. It is Friday morning. It's October 25th, 2024. This is Up North News Radio. I'm Pat Kreitlow here in Chippewa Falls. Nice to have you along. Coming up in just a little bit, it's Friday. We're going to be talking to Courier Newsroom national correspondent Keya Vakil, and we'll be talking about, let's see what. I think there's something happening in 11 days. I'm sure we'll get to some of the details about it. There was another big endorsement of Vice President Kamala Harris from a Wisconsin Republican yesterday. On the show yesterday, we talked about the mayor of Waukesha. Well, now the most senior member of the Wisconsin legislature, a top Republican, is voting for Kamala Harris as well. So we'll talk about that. In our second hour, we'll talk to Mark Jacob about media coverage of all the big stories, including how one of the country's major newspapers was all set to run an editorial endorsing Kamala Harris when the publisher, the owner, was like, nah, you got to kill that. So we'll talk about the tension that sometimes exists between editors and journalists and publishers. And Dan Schumacher will join us to talk sports. Jim Santelle will talk about legal matters in the news, even some ones that don't involve the former president of the United States constantly criming. So all that, Brittany Merlot's weekend forecast and more, coming up starting at 6:06 all across the Civic Media Radio Network. We'll see you soon.
All across Wisconsin from Civic Media, this is Up North News Radio. Now, live from our Lake Wissota studio, here's the founding editor of Up North News, Pat Brightlow.
Well, hey there, Wisconsin. Good morning. It's 6:06 on this Friday morning, October 25th, 2024. 11 days until Election Day, and it's another beautiful day to have you here up north, live from Lake Wissota, from wherever you're listening across the Civic Media Radio Network. And if you're listening through the app, on demand by podcast, or watching us on social media, we appreciate you being with us as well to wrap up the week. I got a question for you and for Greg Bach, who already knows the answer as he joins us from Radio Park. Did you know Jack Jones passed away? And
yeah,
you did. You put the note, and I believe it was. I think Roger put the note up yesterday from Stevens Point, but I could be wrong. And so just before we got started here, I was trying to find the Love Boat theme because, of course, you can't. The man did many songs. You said did you actually see him acting?
I did. I saw him play Sky Masterson in Las Vegas.
Okay.
With who played the Riddler on Batman, and the
Frank Gorshin?
Yep. Frank Gorshin was Nathan Detroit.
We're skewing a little older to kick things off this morning, but it's not so much that I was paying attention much to the bulk of Jack Jones's career, but every Saturday night at 8:00, you would turn on ABC, and if you had just put the kids to bed, if you had one of those babysitting gigs like I did, you turned on the TV and you got a little bit of this. You were waiting for Captain Steubing to show up, give you that wave. There we go.
Exciting and
Hey folks, do you like ocean adventures with C or D-list celebrities?
Hey. Back then, they were B or C-list celebrities, I'll
Fair
have
point.
you know.
The list I'm looking at right now, the clip you picked, the lineup includes people like Mike Connors, who?
Mike
Christine
Maddox.
Farrar, Richard Gillian, Halston, the designer?
Yes.
Bob Mackey, the designer?
Oh, boy. This is big. They must have been doing an episode of the Carol Burnett Show on the Love Boat, because that's where Bob Mackey got his start. Okay, well, we started off the rails right away here, but, we just were looking at things that were happening. And honestly, our theme today is going to be to occasionally look for those nuggets that remind us there's a world out there beyond the presidential election. We're going to be, of course, talking about it a lot, but, in and out, we're going to look for little diversions, like when Dan Schumacher's on later. We're going to talk about the World Series, Yankees and Dodgers coming up. Jim Santelle. Yeah, I know. Jim Santelle, when he comes up, former U.S. Attorney. He's got a couple of cases that don't involve the criming done by a former president of the United States. Because, again, there are other things going on out there. And Roger now chimes in on Facebook. Jack Jones's passing is news to me. Sad to see. He did an episode of Night Court called the Day Court episode. I don't remember that one, but again, I don't remember all of the 80s. But
By the way, Night
that.
Court, the original, holds up.
It does, yes, because one of the D-list stations, runs it. Especially now with the reboot, and the reboot is okay. We actually will watch it, but I mean, it's not going to be like a top 10 all-time favorite. But Jack Jones made an appearance on there. So again, we're looking for those little nuggets to remind us that there are things beyond the campaign. But then there are things that are part of the campaign. There have been 2 political bombshells in Wisconsin over the past 24 hours. On the program yesterday, we told you about how the Republican mayor of Waukesha was going to be voting for Vice President Kamala Harris. And now the legislature's longest-serving Republican, State Senator Rob Cowles of the Green Bay area, is endorsing Harris and is going to vote for her in the presidential election. I served with Rob Cowles in the legislature. He was, by every measure, among the most respected Republicans in the legislature, because he was an honest broker. when he said something, he meant it. Yeah, he's relentlessly honest. Is just a complete man of integrity. I know that's a cliche, but it's true. And the interesting thing is, he's part of God, I hate to say the word dying breed of Republicans, but boy, there was a time when Republican lawmakers, going back to the Nixon administration, were at the forefront of the environmental movement. They were Republicans in that, they wanted taxes to be low. They didn't want, they were very much in favor of job creation and a strong defense and all that. But they also wanted safe drinking water. They also wanted clean air. And Rob Cowles has been somebody seeing the potential for new jobs in cleaner industries. And he sees all of that in Kamala Harris, or at least in Donald Trump. He sees nothing but doom and gloom ahead. The doom and gloom that Donald Trump likes to talk about, that he thinks America is right now, but is not. That's actually what he would bring upon this country. Rob Cowles sees that. The mayor, Sean Riley from Waukesha, sees it as well. We'll talk to Keya Vakil, and we will talk about signs of optimism out there. There's been the pessimism of an endless campaign. Now the optimism that the finish line is in sight, and although things are close, they don't look dire. In our second hour, as I mentioned, we'll talk to Jim Santelle. We'll also talk to Mark Jacob. Now, Mark worked at the Chicago Tribune. He's worked at the Chicago Sun-Times. He knows a thing or two about the tension between an editorial staff of journalists and the people who sign their paychecks. The publisher, the owner, people who are probably much more connected to the money side of things, the business side of a community. And if they're lacking in ethics, they might get in the way of the journalists doing their job. And that's exactly what happened at the Los Angeles Times, where the editorial staff was basically set to hit print on an editorial endorsing Kamala Harris for president, and the owner said to kill it. So we will talk to Mark Jacob about that coming up as well. We'll have today's history lesson coming up at 6:50. And, of course, you can join us along the way like Roger just did by putting a comment in the Up North News Facebook page or the Civic Media Facebook page or the Up North News YouTube page. We'll take your questions and comments there, maybe put them up on screen as well. Or you can call or text the show 855-75-CIVIC, 855-752-4842. And you can, of course, use the Civic Media app, not just to listen to us, but also to call us or to text us. We're very happy to have you along. The forecast for Halloween, it's not looking good. The forecast for Halloween is looking like a typical forecast for Halloween. The local forecast here in western Wisconsin, cold and rainy. And this weekend, on the other hand, looks rather nice. And so I'm guessing that a lot of folks are going to do their Halloween parties and things like that this weekend. And I'll be going to an event this weekend that has a bit of a Halloween theme. And so for the first time in a long time, I had to go into a Halloween store and look at costumes, all those costumes in a bag. Because it was relatively short notice. We're just busy. Yeah. I didn't really have time to get creative and go to Goodwill or go through, other people's closets and find something. So it's like, all right, what do we have for a costume in a bag? And there's all kinds of things out there. And eventually I settled on something, and you go into the changing room there. And that's when you realize these things. I mean, I wasn't expecting them to be tailored clothing. But, no matter how nice they look, it's a sweatsuit. It's a cheap sweatsuit in a bag, sweatpants, and then some variation of a very lightweight, jacket or shirt or something like that. And the hat that, there's all the different hats and accessories that you can wear with your costume. And of course, none of them are exactly the right size, but it's a whole different, it's a weird little cottage industry that has sprung up. They roll into town, they unload everything into a vacant store, they sell it all, they leave town again. It's a really crazy little part of the economy. And I wondered, Greg, if that's something you'd ever been a part of, or when you do Halloween, are you always like looking for the most creative thing there?
I am pretty much a Grinch when it comes to Halloween. It's not my holiday. I don't really care about it. I tried to do it last year once. I co-host Drag Bingo at Lakefront Brewery, and Esther wanted to dress up as Ariel. Oh no, Ursula.
Okay.
And she wanted me to dress up like King Triton.
Oh, I could totally see that.
And I went to two places, and they didn't have any costumes. And one place I went to, they go, "We didn't have any costumes, and you probably wouldn't have them in your size." I'm like, "Ouch! You could have just stopped at we don't have them."
Wow.
But then when I walked into Lakefront, I felt really bad because she's like, "We're going to do this," and I walked in. She goes, "Oh, I forgot." I was like, "Oh God." So I don't know. I don't really get into it. It's just not my. I don't know a lot of people who throw Halloween parties, so I'm good to go. I am going to a party this weekend. It's a birthday party, no Halloween theme, where my friend is cooking and smoking and roasting up 40 pounds of meat.
Ooh. Okay.
Yeah, so that I will have the costume of a man who.
I was going to say, what is the costume of a meat coma? What is that like?
I just have little dribs of like clear glue on my forehead for meat sweats, and it'll be glorious.
Nice. Tony writes in on YouTube, last year in Ashland, there was a car with a Viking ship cover over it. It was amazing, and the kids loved it. That's the other thing that's, again, I'm not in that generation, the whole trick or trunk thing.
I don't know what that means.
You don't know you either. Okay. Maybe somebody wants to call in and talk about trick or trunk and what they do when it works right. It's like this alternative to trick or treating, around strange neighborhoods and strange houses. So a bunch of people who know each other, because God forbid we get to know new people. All people who know each other or relatively know each other gather in a place, a park or whatever. And I think basically you park all the cars, you open up the trunks, and that's where all the candy is. And the kids just go down the line from car to car in their little costumes.
You park the cars, open the trunks. That's where the kids are.
No, that's not what I meant. But anyway, somebody can probably fill in the blanks on that.
I'd love to know more.
All right. We'll unpack some more of the news headlines of the day coming up in just a bit, wherever you're listening across Wisconsin on this Friday morning. When you're here, you're up north, live from Lake Wissota on the Civic Media Radio Network. I'm Pat Kreitlow.
You live your life in the songs you hear on the rock and roll radio. And when a young girl doesn't have any friends, that's a really nice place to go.
Helen Reddy was born on this day. We'll talk about that in today's history lesson. But man, this was like the first song that ever creeped me out on the radio as a kid.
Why?
Are you familiar with the song?
No.
Oh, I should be playing this more. This is like this has got like a Halloween theme going. So it's a girl who's not quite right, and everybody makes fun of her, and then some boy comes over and, thinks that he's going to, get away with something, and instead, because she's unusual, he gets smaller and smaller, and pretty soon she can just carry him around. And everybody still thinks that she's a little unusual. Because she is.
It's like
She's
a
witch.
Twilight Zone episode.
It is. It's very, and again, for like a 10-year-old kid, we're like, what is this? What is happening? But definitely
That's
not
your
the
lesson,
same.
boys. Don't be mean to girls.
Don't be mean to girls, especially the ones that everybody's talking about. No, don't be mean. Yeah, this is a far cry from Helen Reddy, I Am Woman. But it's one that still haunts me to this day.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a look at sports here. We've got several things coming up this weekend. I mentioned the World Series, of course, starting in baseball. In football, you've got the Packers that are playing the Jacksonville Jaguars. Sunday at noon, pregame at 10 o'clock on Civic Media stations in Racine, Kenosha, Richland Center, and Park Falls. Badger football, you can hear them taking on third-ranked Penn State. Pregame at 4:30 tomorrow on several Civic Media stations and on the Civic Media app. And the Badger men's hockey team game at Denver University. Coverage starts tonight on WFHR in Wisconsin Rapids, along with plenty of great high school sports action across the Civic Media radio network and on the app. Check out civicmedia.us to learn more. And, of course, you can always catch the daily newsletter from Up North News at upnorthnewswi.com. Christina Laurie puts that together. She's got a bit of a guide to, as she puts it, haunted happenings around the area as we get set for Halloween next week. And then there's a story in there as well about a couple of people that we've talked to from this group, National Security Leaders for America. More than 1,000 retired generals, admirals, fighter pilots, ambassadors, Bush administration officials, congressional Republicans, and staffers, all out there warning folks that Donald Trump is not fit for office. That was also, so you can get that in our newsletter, but that was also the message of a Kamala Harris rally last night in Atlanta. A great big rally. Barack Obama, Bruce Springsteen, Tyler Perry. Let's see, who am I forgetting here? Samuel L. Jackson, Spike Lee, all there. Springsteen singing, Obama speaking, and all of them, of course, warning of, quote, brutally serious consequences if Trump were to get back into the White House. Vice President Harris asked voters to imagine who will be sitting in the Oval Office 3 months from right now and think about their priorities. And Harris said it's either Donald Trump in there stewing over his enemies list or me working for you, checking off my to-do list. And you have the power to make that decision over which person it's going to be sitting in the Oval Office. Obama said to a packed high school football stadium outside Atlanta, "I get why people are looking to shake things up. But what I cannot understand is why anybody would think Donald Trump would shake things up in ways that are good for you." It was a very long rally, apparently, going way beyond schedule. But, folks wanted to hang around and listen to Springsteen perform The Promised Land and also deliver some remarks, something that he's very much known for. But that wasn't, of course, the only thing that was going on in Milwaukee. There was a rally as well involving Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff. And he was there along with Milwaukee Bucks coach Doc Rivers and former NBA star, Milwaukee native Terry Porter, all drumming up support for early voting. Doc Rivers shared the story of meeting Kamala Harris when she was California Attorney General and he was coach of the LA Clippers. He said she blew him away after a short conversation. A few days later, I asked her to come speak to my team, and I introduced her as the future president of the United States. And that was 13 years ago that she made that kind of an impression on folks. Terry Porter talked about the importance of early voting. He said every second counts in basketball, and in this election, every vote will count. We need to stay in the game, stay on the court, and get things done right. Emhoff said that his wife is ready to be commander. The next thing he says is she's got a to-do list. And that to-do list is for you, for all of us, on solving the problems of this country and doing the work for your family. And I laugh, and Sherry knows why I'm laughing, because when we heard a soundbite from Kamala Harris from Atlanta last night saying, I'm going to work off my to-do list. And, Sherry and I both agreed, like, every good woman has a to-do list. And you check things off and get things done. Not an enemies list, a to-do list. That's how stuff gets done, as people like to say today, not using the word stuff. So what about former President Trump? What's he been up to? Well, continuing to trash the United States of America and saying that things are awful, even though we have the best economy in the world and continue to grow, and saying that he's got a new phrase, that we're now the garbage can for the world. And says, people are coming here from 180 countries and dumping people here. No, much like your own family did. They're coming from 180 countries because this remains the land of opportunity for those who want to work hard and achieve it. Not just those who feel entitled to something. Trump has moved beyond talking about migrants from South America, Venezuela, Mexico. He's also now talking about Congo, where refugees continue coming from a war-torn area in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And that's also led to a case here in the Chippewa Valley, where the settling of some refugees from the Congo drew up a lot of public ire. Well, now we also have the case where in Chippewa Falls, there was a rally recently against bigotry and racism and the kinds of things that some folks have been engaged in out in public. Let's be clear. If there's a list of column A and column B, migrants who are going to work hard and chase opportunity, and those who are going to be racist and think they're entitled to decide who lives in our zip code and who doesn't, I know which list of people I'd rather have as neighbors, and you can influence that as well with your vote coming up in 11 days. More after this with Keya Vakil. You're up north.
Well,
All right, if you missed it before, 11 days to go. And that's 11 days till you're done voting. You can vote now. Go to myvote.wi.gov, go to upnorthnewswi.com, click voting guide, and get information on early voting. So for folks who will still be monitoring all of this activity, we direct you to one Keya Vakil, national correspondent for Courier Newsroom, who's tracking all of this. Keya, how you doing?
I'm all right, Pat. 11 days to go.
Yep, a little. We're all looking a little shell-shocked, but I think I mentioned this yesterday. Maybe it was on Chad's show instead of mine, but I feel kind of like we're turning a corner here. That when it's like, oh, it's a month to go, it's 3 weeks to go, it's 2 weeks to go. We're getting tired of this, and now it's kind of like, hey, the end is in sight here, and you can't help but notice the people who are still very positive about this. You see it at these rallies. We saw rallies in Wisconsin this week, and I know you follow what's happening in other states. You've seen the rallies. You've seen the visits by people like Republicans like Liz Cheney and former presidents like Obama. And so don't listen to the jaded, crusty old journalists here, except that we're going to tell you there are plenty of people still upbeat about how they think this is going to go.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the candidates and their surrogates, fan out over the country in recent weeks. In Nevada, Barack Obama was there on, I believe it was Saturday night. Bill Clinton was there on Tuesday. We have Trump coming there on, Trump was there on Thursday. Michigan, Kamala appeared with Liz Cheney, who also appeared in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. Barack Obama was also there in Detroit.
With Eminem, yeah.
Eminem. North Carolina, same situation. Kamala is there in Charlotte today, I believe. And Bill Clinton was there over the weekend. So these core 7 states, which included Wisconsin, obviously, are all going to get all the attention and all the visits between now and Election Day. But yeah, what you're seeing from those rallies, at least on the Democratic side, is a lot of enthusiasm among the base. And, will that translate to a victory? Impossible to tell at this point, but you weren't seeing that earlier in the year, obviously. Mm-hmm. And that it's still being sustained a couple months after she entered the race and picked her VP and Tim Walz, is a good sign. It's going to be a jump ball. I think it was always going to be a jump ball of an election. We've seen that each of the last 2 cycles. And we know Trump has for better or worse, has a quite high floor of, 46% at least. And, the question is if that's going to be enough in the Electoral College or not. But yeah, there's a lot of enthusiasm and joy that, is helpful for me to see in my, cold, jaded, cynical journalist heart.
Yes. But again, you could see it just in the fact that, we forgot that Bruce Springsteen appeared last night in Atlanta. You've got Beyonce expected tonight at a rally in Texas. Of course, her song Freedom has been the campaign anthem here. So people are like, the celebrities wouldn't be doing this if they didn't feel like there was something positive that could come from all of this. So, I would just say, go vote early, enjoy the rallies and enjoy the messaging, because it's nice to hear a lot of being for something rather than against something. There's always going to be a little bit of both in every election, but try to embrace what you're voting for this time around. Here's the evidence of it. The amount of early voting going on in the states, with early voting has, again, if you're a Grinch, it's going to make your heart grow 3 sizes larger. It's weird though. You can't really, it's weird to compare the numbers because 2020 was a COVID year. So set that aside. It's still, this is not an election where everybody's like, well, I'm just not going to vote. I'm going to stay home. No, they're voting, and they're voting right now.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing, I think you're exactly right. You can't really compare 2024 to 2020 or even 2022. It's an apples to oranges to onions comparison. We don't have the worst of the pandemic raging right now. People are still voting by mail, but early voting is really where we're seeing more and more people do it. And part of that is because it's convenient and easy. And part of that is because finally Republicans are largely on board with it. You still see Donald Trump spreading stuff about mail voting once in a while, but he has encouraged his supporters to vote early, and good for them. They should. Everyone should vote early. There's no reason not to. Now, does that mean if Trump loses come election day, I don't think he'll spread lies about it and mail voting and all sorts of voting that didn't go his way? Of course he will, because he's full of it. But, people should vote however and whenever they want, whether it's on election day, early voting, or by mail. And that we're seeing pretty high turnout in a lot of places is a good thing.
They should vote. They should vote early. But boy, as I'm looking through news from the states here, where in Virginia they're pushing to remove voters, or Iowa, the top official there says he has a secret list of ineligible voters. That is something that should just never be acceptable. It's one thing to do voter file maintenance in between elections, but with less than 2 weeks to go, to be pushing that, there's nothing in line with democracy about doing something like this. Not security. That's just gutter politics.
Yeah, I mean, it's trying to disenfranchise people who you don't think will vote for Donald Trump. That's literally what's happening. It's happening in every swing state. Iowa's not even a swing state, and it's happening there. We've seen lies and are continuing to see them about non-citizens voting in places like North Carolina and Nevada. Not happening.
College students, all the Wisconsin college students who are getting these texts with false information, basically threatening them if they vote in the wrong state, when that's not anything close to what the rules are. But these are people playing games with voters. Yeah,
I mean, we're seeing it in everywhere, and we're going to see more of it between now and election day. We're going to see it, unless the election's a complete and total blowout, I think we're going to see it after election day, unfortunately. And so it's just, it gets to the heart of what is the modern Republican Party, unfortunately. And it's an anti-democratic party that does not actually believe in, democracy or voting. They believe in their own power, and, elections only count when they win. If they lose, they don't count. And that's not a sustainable thing for a democracy. If Trump wins, you're not going to see Democrats refuse to certify an election. You're not going to see efforts to steal the election from him. You're not going to see efforts to file. I'm sure there'll be some disputes, legal challenges over good faith things, but you're not going to have an entire apparatus that kicks into gear to try to reverse the results. And we know every reporter in the country, every political office holder in the country knows that's going to happen if Trump loses. And that is an insane place to be as a so-called democracy.
Yeah, to bake that in as your assumption, that's what he's going to do. And it is why you see, again, Liz Cheney this week. And, of course, the big news yesterday about State Senator Rob Cowles from Green Bay, again, as rock-ribbed a Republican as they come, saying that he's going to vote for Kamala Harris. And that list is only going to continue to grow over these final few days. So let's turn to some positive news from the states. And, again, where you see how every election can make a difference. Now, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer is not up this year. She's in the middle of her term, but continues to do her job. And this week made news about taking the next step toward ensuring that contraception is available to women in Michigan for little or no cost. Just strikes me as, smart policy if you want to avoid unplanned pregnancies.
Yeah. And to be clear, that is a thing that most people should be on the same side on, especially if you're anti-abortion. You should want to support contraception. That they don't, most people who are anti-abortion don't support contraception, kind of gives the game away. It's not really about, abortion. It's about trying to force women to give birth. And you see that in, not to segue from Michigan, but I believe it was Missouri, where there was a lawsuit filed because birth rates are going down there. And that's not something Republicans want, because it deprives them of future workers in the economy. Human beings are human beings. We're not robots meant to work, and that's the only reason we exist.
Right.
But going back to Michigan, that's just good policy. People deserve equal access to birth control. It shouldn't be something that you can only get if you can afford it. we should all agree that teen pregnancies going down as they have in the last 2 decades is an unambiguous win. No one should be calling for a reversal of that, even though some people are.
Yeah. The news this week has also included a reminder that however this turns out, even if it is something where, Kamala Harris wins, Tammy Baldwin wins, and so forth, there's still going to be so many challenges to deal with. In my mind, that really has to include the way that money has flowed everywhere with no restriction whatsoever, especially corporate money, especially Elon Musk money from a defense contractor who's got a political action committee that's coordinating with the candidate when that's supposedly supposed to be illegal. Key, thank goodness for Tim Walz. I think that's the only thing we can say about this is he's willing to very publicly call out Elon Musk for some of the goofiness that he was doing with Trump earlier in the week.
Yeah, and I would really love to repeat it. I'll try to not.
I wish we could. Well, we went with dipstick. We're good with that.
Okay.
So.
Your audience can use their imaginations there.
Yes.
And I'll mention you didn't even note like the most confounding thing of this is that Elon Musk owns one of the biggest social media platforms where politics and news information is shared, and it has become a cesspool of just anywhere from like alt-right to full-on neo-Nazi hate and conspiracies and anti-trans nonsense. And this is a guy who's the richest man in the world, who owns one of the premier communication platforms in the world, who has defense contracts, who creates cars that are one of the most popular car brands in the world. And this is the guy who's jumping up and down on stage, giving Trump millions and millions and millions of dollars to try to elect him. That's not a good thing. That's not a healthy political system.
No, it's not. And again, it wouldn't matter if it was working, for Democrats as well. This is not the kind of system that is sustainable when you let this much money, corporate money, untraceable money, run rampant through the system. And we simply have to be able to do better than that. And it's not just the disinformation. It's the way that on, Twitter, information is being suppressed. There are plenty of people citing examples of stories that should be getting more traction about, Trump praising Hitler's generals, and people noting that the statistics on those stories are so low that, intentional suppression is the only explanation.
Yeah. I mean, that's at this point, you just never trust a single thing Elon Musk says, or I take everything on Twitter with a grain of salt. Right. Take everything. It's just, he's using it as a political weapon to advance what he wants done. And, it's a private company. I suppose that's his right, but it's really not good for a democracy. And it is a huge problem because we are 11 days away from an election where we've already seen nonsense about like full-on lies, both from domestic and foreign actors about Tim Walz, about Kamala Harris. It is going to be absolute fire hose of BS, and there isn't a newsroom in America that's going to be able to debunk everything. And that's the unfortunate reality. And so, where does that leave us? I'm not really sure, other than I would recommend nobody use Twitter in the next 11 days.
Yeah. Well, and especially when the guy who bought it, when the owner is sharing AI related material that is false. AI is only going to get more ingrained into these campaigns. Again, if there's no accountability for all of this, which is my cue to remind everybody that this entire conversation did not involve Pat and Keya at all. We are robots. We are programmed to try to speak the way that Pat and Keya would. And I think we did a pretty good job today. That damn robots. Anyway, Keya Vakil, thank you very much. Hang in there. We'll talk again next week, and then we'll bring this thing in for a landing.
Bet.
Okay. We'll be back with more after this. You're Up North.
Now, because of all of you, we're going to have them, and they're going to have them in both halves of the show. So here's the first appearance of the Rolling Stones.
Ed Sullivan sounds cranky. Now, because of you people, he's saying to all these screaming women in the audience, we'll have them on twice this hour. This would be the Rolling Stones making their first appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show on this day 60 years ago, 1964. He promised afterwards they'll never be on the show again. They were on 5 more times because, you know, ratings.
Yeah.
You don't have to like them if your audience likes them. There you go.
What did he have against them? I mean, it's like
he was an old newspaper columnist. He didn't like any of this rock and roll stuff. He wanted, you know, Sid Caesar and Senor Wences and Tito Puente and Pat Boone.
He was a boomer before it was a boomer.
He was, yes, exactly. So that was, again, 60 years ago today, the Rolling Stones first appearing on the Ed Sullivan Show. We mentioned that today is the anniversary of the birth of the late Helen Reddy, born this day in 1941. Before Olivia Newton-John came along, she was basically the Australian import to the world. Export, I should say. Born this day in 1912, Minnie Pearl. Remember her?
Yes.
Yeah, hee-haw regular, country comedian. Born Sarah Cannon in Centerville of Hickman County, Tennessee. On this day in 1912, passed away in 1996.
I thought she was from Grindr's Switch.
Turns out it was all an act. Oh, my gosh. Happy birthday to Katy Perry, hitting the big 4-0 today. Sierra is 39 years old today. And New York Yankee Juan Soto is 26. He's marking his 26th birthday by playing in the World Series. And I guess he becomes a free agent after this. And so he doesn't, you know how you get $5 in your birthday card from grandma?
Yeah.
He's going to get a lot more than $5 when this World Series is over, one way or the other. So
I found out that there's a guy named Taylor Tremmel who played for both the Dodgers and he played for the Dodgers early this season.
Yes.
He plays for the Yankees now, and no matter who wins, he can get a ring.
That's right. Yes, because
Yeah.
he played for either team.
Yeah.
That's a cool deal. Let's see. The number one album this day in 1986. So we're going back a long ways now. But Bon Jovi still very active, but they were new on the scene when this album hit number one on that day.
Shot to the heart, and you're too late, darling. You give love a bad name.
38 years later, that album, Slippery When Wet, which also includes Living on a Prayer, has sold more than 12 million copies worldwide.
It slaps.
Yeah, it apparently is Taylor Swift week on the album charts here because for at least the third day in a row, we've got Taylor Swift album news from the history books. It was on this day in 2010 that she released her third album, Speak Now, with the more confessional song on there, Mean, hitting the charts. On this day in 1986, we said the number one album was by Bon Jovi. The number one single was by Cyndi Lauper.
Hey, girls might just want to have fun, but that doesn't mean they don't feel too.
You with the sad heart. Don't be discouraged.
Now, this marked, with this song at number one, it was the first time ever, 1986, that the top 3 spots on the Billboard Hot 100 were all female solo acts. Can't believe it took that long, but it was Cyndi Lauper with True Colors, Tina Turner with Typical Male, and Janet Jackson's When I Think of You. On this day in 2008, Britney Spears had the number one song with Womanizer. It was her first number one since Baby One More Time, which had been 9 years earlier. On this day in 1975, Paul Simon's Still Crazy After All These Years album was released. Along with that title track, it also had 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover and this.
In my little town, I grew up believing.
Also on this day in 1975, Elton John played Dodger Stadium, where they're going to play a baseball game tonight. But it turns out you can use it for concerts as well. Elton John sold out Dodger Stadium. He sold it out twice. Here's a little clip of him doing Pinball Wizard back then. It's tough now for folks to understand. Obviously, Elton John is this legend, and it's weird to think back when he was new on the scene.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, just a shotgun rise to the top right away because he was over the top and flamboyant, but the songs were great. He had all of this talent. And yeah, he was selling out stadiums like crazy back in 1975. On this day in 2001, Microsoft released Windows XP, which was a big deal for the computer world until people realized it was still a Microsoft product and had its issues. On the National Day calendar today, a lot of stuff here. World Pasta Day, Global Champagne Day, it's Breadstick Day, Greasy Food Day. Let's see, it's Bandana Day, International Artist Day, and finally it's Chucky Day from the Halloween movie, the horror movie with the doll.
You mean Child's Play?
Child's Play, yeah. The one that a friend of mine
Pat.
mistakenly thought was a kid movie and played it for his kid who had the worst nightmares that night. Parenting tip, kids, know what's in your movie. More in our second hour.
I feel like you know that right away, but, I get it.
Yeah. More in our second hour of Up North News Radio on the Civic Media Radio Network. Mr. Santelle, good morning.
Good morning, sir. How are you? Both of you. Good to see you.
I'm fine, except that, now I don't know if Greg can hear us or not. Greg, are you hearing us?
the gates to an
I don't believe he
invasion of
is.
criminal
Nope.
migrants from
Greg,
prisons and
can you hear me?
jails, from insane asylums.
Nope,
and
he's working on other things.
coming out of
Anyway, the email that you sent to him and to me, you misspelled civic on there, so he actually did not see the email. So I'll have to tell him separately about the microphone issue.
That's fine. We'll connect up on that too. I saw that after I sent it, but spelling has never been my my strong suit. So hopefully no spelling test this morning, and we'll do that. Yeah, I'm going to be down there for the first time tomorrow morning on Racine, so maybe we'll figure out some equipment.
I was going to say, yeah, you should walk out of there with one.
Right? Yeah.
Insane
Lots of
asylums
boxes
and
being
mental
unpacked the last time I was there.
Exactly.
So.
Just
From all over
take the
world,
one marked
from
kitchen.
Venezuela,
I'm sure it's got all the microphones in it.
Just
When
take one.
Kamala
Just
came
take
in,
something.
she deliberately dismantled our border and threw open the gates.
Hey, are you in any way part of some of this election protection stuff where there's attorneys all over the state who are kind of like on call in case anything goes haywire?
I'm actually not. I have not been. I didn't raise my hand, and no one's reached out. So I'm doing some other things right around the election.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually a poll worker. I'm both on Monday for some reason, then on Tuesday all day. So probably a little bit difficult for me to respond to things on that. So I'm an assistant election chief, believe it or not. How impressive is that?
That's very impressive.
I'm actually not a part of that, but know some friends who are doing that sort of thing. It's going to be wild. It will be wild.
We really can't get into like a lot of the detail of election law and things like that, because we definitely have stories where, like in Iowa, officials are trying to purge 2,000 people. They say they have a secret list of ineligible voters, and of course in Virginia, they're trying to drop tens of thousands of people from the rolls at the last minute, and I just don't know. I don't think that anything could happen here, but
heaven forbid, right in Wisconsin, that right. But again, generally, if you want to talk about that, I mean, there are remedies to do that, and whether it's and basically it is running into court, mostly federal court under the Voting Rights Act, other things. We can certainly chat about that if you'd like to, whether this morning, next morning, whenever. Again, I can talk to them about the procedures.
Yeah. Maybe we will dedicate a good part of next week, since we'll be heading into it there. Okay. All right. I'm going to get some more coffee. I'll see you in a bit.
Wonderful.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Happy Friday.
Yay.
All across Wisconsin from Civic Media, this is Up North News Radio. Now, live from our Lake Wissota studio, here's the founding editor of Up North News, Pat Brightlow.
Hey, good morning. Happy Friday. Welcome back to Up North News Radio. Unabashedly Wisconsin news and stories brought to you by Courier Newsroom and carried by our friends on the Civic Media Radio Network. Nice to have you along at 7:06. Former U.S. Attorney Jim Santelle is standing by. We'll be talking to Mark Jacob this hour about media coverage of the week's big stories. Dan Schumacher will be along to talk sports. Meteorologist Brittany Merlot joining us in just a sec, along with Greg Bach from Radio Park. But to answer the question, Pat, what do you mean when you're always saying unabashedly Wisconsin? It's a phrase we've been using since day one, back in the first days of 2020, to say that we at Up North News love this state so much, and we love it so much that we will call out those who threaten the things that make living here so great, which includes a government that works when good people serve in it, fair taxes, clean natural resources, education for everybody. All of those things and more are what make us unabashedly Wisconsin. And that's what we stand for at Up North News. And we're very happy to work with our friends here at Civic Media to carry that message to you every weekday morning here from 6 until 8 o'clock. If you want to reach the show at any point, 855-75-CIVIC, 855-752-4842, or put a comment on YouTube, on the Up North News YouTube page, or the Up North News Facebook page, or the Civic Media Facebook page, like Rob does over on YouTube, where he says, "Good morning from Tigerton. It's cloudy and 44 degrees. We had 0.15 of an inch of rain overnight. He says, my shoulder is still bothering me, a sharp one that goes from shoulder toward the elbow. I got to check it out. I forgot to mention yesterday was the 70th anniversary of Channel 7 in Wausau, WSAW, first television station to go on the air in north central Wisconsin. So happy 70th to Channel 7. So having received the weather report from Tigerton, it's time to get it for the rest of the state here from Brittany Merlot. Brittany, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fantastic. It's a nice, mild morning. We got a little bit of rain like we needed.
I was going to say, did you notice that weird thing of water falling out of the sky last night?
What's that?
I know, it was very strange, but we finally got some rain around here.
We sure did. In areas in western parts of the state and far southeastern parts of the state, got at least 1/4 of an inch to nearly 1/2 an inch. The rest of the areas, though, the driest spots, really just picked up a trace to 1/10 of an inch of rain. So we need more, but we'll take that. When it's clearing out of here, we're actually going to see bright and beautiful skies through the day today as a high-pressure system settles in for today, tomorrow, and even Sunday as well. So this means we have a bright, beautiful weekend. No rain in the forecast, at least for the weekend. And highs today will be in those mid to upper 50s. We've got a nice south breeze that's going to start to kick in and warm us up a little bit. So we will be into those mid-50s tomorrow, low 60s on Sunday, and then nearing 70 on Monday. And no joke, some of us could hit 80 degrees on Tuesday. So this is the beginning of a warm-up, but a nice seasonal weekend.
Wouldn't it be great if that upper 70s type of conditions that we plan to enjoy on Tuesday, wouldn't it be great if that lasted into Halloween? And Halloween night for all the little kids who are trick-or-treaters, he said, setting everybody up for doom and gloom and dismay.
The forecast is gloomy, I'll say
yes,
that.
Yes. It's right now it's not looking really good. So
no.
Maybe surprise your neighbors and trick-or-treat on Tuesday instead of Thursday.
That's a good idea.
Here's some motor oil. I got a stapler, whatever.
Here's some Penzi spices. Put that on. I
don't give away Penzi spices. Those are expensive.
Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, you put them on a Three Musketeers and it makes anything taste better, Brittany, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Have a great day. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Hey, did you know that along with the radio shows here on Civic Media, there are some other podcasts that you can check out. The newest one is called Wisconsin Forward with Matt Rothschild, a weekly dive into a topic surrounding a current political problem in the state of Wisconsin, background on how the state got where it is today, and a possible way out of the issue. So you can subscribe and download Wisconsin Forward wherever you get your podcasts, or check it out on the Civic Media website, civicmedia.us. Civicmedia.us is also where you can find out some information on sports, the sports that are being carried, high school sports on several stations around the network, and then things like Badger football. The Badgers host number 3 Penn State. It's a night game, pregame at 4:30, kickoff at 6:30. And you can listen on WLAK in Amory or WFHR in Wisconsin Rapids, maybe WRJN in Racine Kenosha, or if you're over by Richland Center, WRCE. But Pat, I'm not near any of those places. Well, it's also going to be on the Civic Media app. So get that downloaded and dive in. Early voting, of course, is underway in Wisconsin, and the numbers have been so encouraging that what they should not be is discouraging in any way that you think, well, it's too popular, I can't go do it. Of course you can. Of course you can, and the lines won't be anything like they will be on election night. So to learn more about that, once again, head back over to civicmedia.us, where Dan Schaefer has put together a voting guide on all the legislative races. Over at UpNorthNewsWI.com, we have a voting guide with stories about some of the key races and some of the basics of voting as well. And you can always check out the Wisconsin Elections Commission website, myvote.wi.gov, for all the latest there. There's one more thing over at the Civic Media website to tell you about, and that was the latest story of a prominent Wisconsin Republican saying that they're going to be voting for Vice President Kamala Harris in the presidential race. Now, yesterday at about this time, it was the mayor of Waukesha, Sean Riley, saying that he was going to be voting for Vice President Harris. But then the other shoe dropped. There was another one. And this is the most senior member of the Wisconsin legislature right now, Republican Senator Rob Cowles of the Green Bay area. Senator Cowles is not running for re-election. There's new maps, new districts. He is, I had his age in here. I want to say he's like 72 years old, something like that. And he's saying, well, it's time to call it good. 74 years old. So he announced back in April he would not be seeking another term in the legislature. And he's now saying, before he rides off into the legislative sunset, that there's no way that he's going to be voting for Donald Trump. He said this exclusively to Civic Media. He said it on the Rational Revolution show hosted by Mark Becker. You'll recall Becker is the former chair of the Brown County Republican Party. He's now part of the group Wisconsin Republicans for Harris Walls. And the full episode will air tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock. But obviously the news has already gotten out, along with some of the quotes from there. And Rob Cowles says, Trump has to be defeated, and we have to protect the Constitution. And the country will go on, even if there are some liberal things that Kamala Harris might do or might not do. You have to have the foundation of the Constitution to protect democracy. If you don't have that, we will disappear. Cowles goes on to say, I really think this is one of the most important things I've done. Hopefully people will accept that and listen to me. Those that have trusted me and believed in me will think about that. And if they're undecided, that we have to make a change here. And again, that's Rob Cowles. I served with Rob Cowles in the legislature. He is, I described him last hour as a rock-ribbed Republican, a real one, a real Republican. Not whatever this MAGA movement is now, which has nothing to do with republicanism. It has nothing to do actually with conservative politics. It is now a movement that has crept closer toward, tiptoed into, and in many ways fully embraced something that is much closer to authoritarianism, to fascism. And you're hearing more real Republicans talking about that. They're tired of being called rhinos, Republican in name only. At first, it really stung. They thought, hey, maybe the party is moving on without me. Well, where they're moving to is someplace you don't want to be. You don't want to be where they're taking the current Republican Party, because now that's what's Republican in name only. Rob Cowles understands that. Sean Riley understands that. Liz Cheney understands that. 1,000 different national security officials. We've talked to two of them on this program in the past week who will tell you that what Trumpism is has nothing to do with what the Republican Party once stood for. The party of Reagan, the party that understood that Russia is one of our biggest threats. Now we've learned overnight that Elon Musk, the world's richest man, the one who is spreading more disinformation on Twitter, the platform he owns, than any other major source. We learned overnight about how often Elon Musk has been in conversations with Vladimir Putin. Elon Musk, Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump. That's an axis in and of itself right there that is completely antithetical to the notion of democracy and respecting the will of the voters. And Rob Cowles talked about that. He said the big picture that really came to me in recent days and the last week was thinking about fascism in World War II. And members of my own family who fought the fascists in Japan and Germany, and all the guys buried all over the places in this country in Arlington. And then you've got Trump saying nice things about Hitler and sucking up to Putin. No, he is clearly our enemy. Putin is a living enemy. And we have to show the courage that people in the World War II era had. And again, if you want to hear that directly from Rob Cowles, I urge you to tune into Rational Revolution tomorrow at 2 on the Civic Media Radio Network or through the Civic Media app. Because the Russian influence is digging so deep into America right now, exactly as planned, using our own freedom of the press against us, using our own media system against us. You can see it in the comment sections. I'm seeing it in real time right now on YouTube, where somebody named George is typing in all caps, liar. The next one says liar. The next one says liar. The next one says Russia is no threat in all capital letter. And the last one, rhinos. Oh, here's the next one, no free press. George, I appreciate that you can work a keyboard really well, but you're only providing more evidence. We'll talk to former U.S. Attorney Jim Santelle coming up right after this. You're Up North. That was fun.
Good morning, Jim.
Morning, Greg. How are you?
I'm doing well.
You're in
I'm in Racine. Oh, yeah, that's where I'm at, baby.
He will be there tomorrow, Greg, and don't let him leave the building without a microphone. He sent me an email last night about that.
Okay, well, I will. Okay, well,
I very briefly had one right around the Democratic convention, and then it had to be taken back to support the effort in Chicago. So we'll see, right?
Yeah. So just real quick, Jim, as a reminder, just close out all your tabs that have notifications on there.
So we're not hearing the bling, bling.
Yeah, no bling, blings. And
sound like I'm over at the at Bally's Casino over here.
Whoa.
Absolutely. We'll do that right now. Good.
And then Mark, God, why am I getting my Mark? You're not Mark, you're Jim. Jim, do you own like wireless headphones at all?
I have an old pair that I've used from time to time that I'm not real confident in. So the package actually that Brian Kelly had put together again a couple months ago had both headphones and a microphone. It was in a box.
Yeah.
It was
all right.
Waukesha, and so it was out there. And I'm again not being critical at all. Just said they needed it for Chicago and used it then. And,
sign Mr. The Frog and his friends to the standard rich and famous contract, which includes a box with a microphone and headsets, please. That's the best Orson Welles I could do from the Muppet movie. I'm sorry. 10 seconds. Here we go.
All right.
Send lawyers, guns, and money. Dad, get me out of this. Ha!
Well, I mentioned the comment section, and needless to say, some folks took umbrage to what somebody else put in there, and I don't normally give play-by-play of the comment section. I'm going to make an exception in this particular case in order to share a comment in here from a gentleman named Randy, who said, "My uncle is buried in Anzio, Italy, and fought fascism. Now to see the fascist movement of Trump and Musk is both horrifying and saddening that his death and all others who fought and died to protect American values is now under attack again, but from inside America." And you heard us talk about that earlier in the week with actually it was just yesterday, with General Randy Manner, talking about how when he first took an oath as an officer, as a military officer, and he thought it was so odd that the oath includes to protect and defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic, and wondering, what do you mean by domestic? And this is what we have now. People who are hostile to democracy, who refer to people who disagree with them as the enemy within, and speak very highly of retribution, of jailing members of the press, of jailing political opponents. That's the kind of thing that we have to protect and defend the Constitution from. Another guy who swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution and to serve the rule of law would be former U.S. Attorney Jim Santelle. Jim, how are you?
Pat, good to be with you again this morning. Lots and lots of things going on in America, including the fight against fascism and that kind of thing. We embrace the First Amendment, your ability to say those things, but that also means that we can engage in very vigorous pushback, equally articulating views in the opposite direction, which is what we have to do.
Right. And I'll say, now we're going to try to wander away from presidential matters here, but if we're getting into this, the point that you've raised and that I've raised is that recent Supreme Court decision talking about presidential immunity goes right at the heart of this, where according to those right-wing justices, especially the ones Trump appointed, he can meddle in and take over the Department of Justice and use it as a criminal to legally punish his enemies, like Putin did with Navalny and everybody else. And that should scare the bejesus out of everybody.
Absolutely. And actually, a program note, if I may, tomorrow morning on Amicus, we're going to spend a lot of time digging deep into that. Here's the point, which is that the claims that Donald Trump and others are making right now about using what the Supreme Court has said, remember, once again, your listeners know this well, absolute immunity for a president for any engagements, communications, directions to the Department of Justice. What can you do with that? You can plainly appoint people in these positions of responsibility. You can use pardon powers, again, which are virtually unfettered. All kinds of things in terms of programs, initiatives, the use of Department of Justice agencies. You can hire and fire the FBI director, all sorts of other agency heads, about 7 or 8 different things that are legal to do, but if abused, will result in the kind of fascist things that you and your listeners are talking about right now.
Exactly. So again, more on that on Amicus, 9 a.m. tomorrow, and hear it again Sunday across the Civic Media Radio Network. Jim, I was thinking, are there things beyond all of the criming that former President Trump is doing and others, as we still try to tie a bow on the people who tried to essentially stage a coup in 2020? And we thought, can we get past that for just a moment? I know we're going to do more after the election, but if we were going to talk about things that weren't related to the presidential election, is there anything else? And how's this for a transition, folks? The Menendez brothers. Now, I can already hear people saying, no, go back to politics. Please. Go back to politics. No, the Menendez brothers are these people who killed their parents a long time ago. The LA District Attorney is seeking resentencing. What has brought that on?
Sure. And so a number of different things. Again, 1989 is when they killed. They admitted this. There were 2 trials back then. First one resulted in a mistrial. Second one resulted in their convictions and terms of imprisonment, no possibility of parole for life, that sort of thing. 2 things, really 2 sets of things. One is the media attention. There have been all kinds of there's been a docudrama, so to speak, coming out of Netflix, all sorts of other so-called educational or informational things put together about them. They have been a little bit in the media as well, as they've been given interviews. And so there's been that piece of it, just bringing to another generation, for many of us, obviously, who were at the time, renewed attention. The other piece of this, which is a little bit more in the legal area, is that some new evidence has come forward. And that includes a letter that was written by Eric Menendez many months before he and Lyle brutally killed their parents with shotguns, in which he describes the sexual abuse that he was suffering at the hands of his father, arguably his mother as well. He writes this letter to a cousin named, and that eventually ends up in the hands of a journalist named Robert Rand. This comes forward and you think, well, gee, that sounds fairly self-serving. The significance of it wasn't part of the trial and would have maybe supported this notion, not legal forgiveness, if you will, to use a sort of a non-legal term, but certainly supporting their allegations in the first trial that the reasons for their doing this was this constant and unrelenting sexual abuse that at least one of them, maybe both of them, were suffering. In the second trial, the judge prohibited them principally from doing that. The jury never heard that, and then they get convicted. So that kind of evidence coming back again is again prompting the DA, again, as you indicated, in Los Angeles. His name is George Gascon. He's also involved in his own reelection campaign right now, to seek today. He's indicated will do it, told us yesterday, going to go into court, at least petition to the court today for their reduction in their sentence. That probably will not happen today. We don't know when it'll happen, but almost certainly under California law, because of the way that when they were sentenced, they were under 26. It could mean that they will be released almost forthwith, almost immediately, when the judge puts his imprimatur on this. There's got to be a hearing. There's a process here, but it is significant. And again, not aside from just the sort of Netflix views of all this, because it does indicate that we should, from time to time, reconsider these cases when our views about things have changed. Here's a situation where maybe way back in 1994, which again, a long time ago, we didn't really appreciate the extent to which even males can be the subject of sexual abuse at the hands of their parents. Today, a greater appreciation of that. One wonders out loud what a jury would have done back then if they had had that information. That's basically what the DA is trying to remedy now.
That's, I mean, it's very amazing. It gets into the whole heart of what juries can and can't hear based on things that happened in the past. You can hear much more about this from Jim Santelle on Amicus, a law review, coming up at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Jim, thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Always a pleasure to be with you. We'll see you again next week. Take care, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Mark Jacob is next. You're up north.
I was gambling in Havana. I took a little risk.
All right. There we go. Get that microphone.
We'll do that. And looking forward to being in Racine tomorrow for the first time. So
yes, I know.
We'll
enjoy it.
All right.
All right.
Good. Thanks,
See
Pat.
you later.
Thanks, Greg.
Yep. Bye. Mr. Jacob, how are you?
I'm doing fine.
Fine.
It's funny. People, ask, what do you think about the election? And I say, well, I'm cautiously optimistic, but scared to death. But, and those aren't really conflicting emotions.
No, not at all. Probably start with the LA Times.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. And also, there's a Washington Post angle of that now.
Oh, okay.
The Washington Post is not endorsed yet, and there's some people thinking that they are afraid to endorse.
Oh, I see that now. Okay. All right. Well, we definitely got a place to start here.
Yeah, so. This is what you call anticipatory obedience, or complying in advance. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. All right. I'll see you in a bit.
All right.
Greetings, loved ones. Let's take a journey.
I know a place where the grass is really greener. Warm,
So, Katy Perry turns 40 years old today. One of her hits was California Girls, and we begin our visit with Mark Jacob out in California as we review some of the things that are happening in the media world this week. You can get Mark's newsletter, Stop the Presses, at stopthepresses.news, along with his video series, Media Misses, with Stephen Beschloss. Mark Jacob, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing fine.
All right. So we go to California and what is happening over at the Los Angeles Times. And it is... It's a combination of things. It's politics, obviously. It's, what is the value in a newspaper editorial and a newspaper endorsement in this digital age? But also it's about corporations and money. And as somebody who has worked for the Chicago Tribune and the Chicago Sun-Times, I'm guessing you know a thing or two about tension between journalists and the people who sign their paychecks. So with that in mind, how would you describe to the listeners what has happened this week at the LA Times?
Well, the LA Times was purchased about 6 years ago by a billionaire medical guy, a guy who made a bunch of money in medicine named Patrick Soon-Shiong. And he bought the LA Times, and he's done okay with it, but except that it kind of has had a smaller footprint than it used to, but it's still going. That's a good thing. So the editorial board meets, and they generally endorse Democrats. I mean, California is a blue state, and this year, Pat, there is a lot of reasons to be endorsing Kamala Harris. I would have to say, when you put the two candidates up next to each other. Anyway, so the editorial board at the Los Angeles Times says, yeah, we want to endorse Harris. And Soon-Shiong, the owner, says, no, you're not endorsing anyone. We're not going to have an endorsement. And which is very disappointing. A lot of people think that it's what has been called complying in advance or anticipatory obedience, where companies and people bend to a would-be dictator even before he forces them to, in order to protect themselves. And you're starting to see some indications in the news media that rich people and corporations are just trying to stay out of Trump's way by not making him mad in case he wins. And anyway, the good part of this story is that the head of the editorial board of the Los Angeles Times, Mariel Garza, resigned. And so did two other members of the editorial board. They said they couldn't remain silent. They were not going to comply with this. And that's the kind of courage we need in these times. Meanwhile, at the Washington Post, which has been the newspaper, to me, one of the best newspapers covering the election, certainly better than the New York Times, they haven't made an endorsement yet, which is highly curious. And there's starting to be a lot of speculation in the Washington Post newsroom that they're not going to make an endorsement, that the owner, Jeff Bezos, doesn't want Trump to harass his big business, Amazon, and so he may just stay on the sidelines this time. That would be the thing about it, Pat. I question, like you mentioned, I question the value of endorsements for presidents, since people have all the information they need. They don't need a newspaper telling them how to vote. But it's really important for institutions to step up at this time, I think.
Well, especially in light of the fact that some of these institutions' owners have government contracts. And as has been noted here, Bezos doesn't want to risk endangering Amazon's government contracts. You've got Elon Musk, who has all kinds of government contracts and yet is cozy with Putin and could help or hurt what's happening in Ukraine as a result. So resigning your job as editor of a newspaper, might not necessarily cause, a national chain reaction, but you got to start someplace, and you've got to have people who stand for principle.
Yeah, and you see some of that. I've been so disappointed in the way that these supposedly mainstream centrist Republican politicians just folded, like a house of cards to Trump. And when you see the few that didn't, just recently you had didn't you guys had a longtime legislator in Wisconsin, right? Who endorsed Harris?
Rob Cowles, yes.
Yeah, and you have Fred Upton in Michigan, former congressman, Republican congressman. You got it. This happens one person at a time. People need to stand up. You and I are talking right now about how people need to stand up, and we're standing up, and everyone needs to do that. Everyone needs to, instead of just like kind of acting as if you don't have any control over what's happening in our society. If everyone does something, you do have control of your society.
Well, that gets us to CNN and whatever their business model is now for having talking heads on. And I've never seen it, but of course I'm always on social media, so there's always clips of this guy named Scott Jennings. And the outrageous things that he's saying, which are so patently untrue frequently, and the other panelists call him out on it. But again, that's a talk show. That's hardly news analysis when you're coddling and continually giving a platform to somebody who is spreading misinformation. Am I wrong in saying there's a difference between what your editorial output looks like?
Yeah, well, I think to a large extent that's entertainment. They want to have a bunch of people yelling at each other over a table. And they think that's going to entertain people. One thing that's really important to emphasize is it's not just that CNN is giving Scott Jennings a platform; they're paying him to do that. And for years, CNN has hired crazy right wingers. And again, I've said this before on your show. Conservatives, fine. Be an ideological conservative. I respect that. Everyone has their opinions, and that's great. It's liars that bother me.
Yeah.
So, and Scott Jennings is like, trying to minimize the fact that Trump likes Hitler is, that's really a pretty untenable position, but he's taking it. And you know why he's taking it? Because CNN hired him to take it. CNN, and there's a long history of people they've hired in the past to do that same job, to have that same role where you're the right winger who argues with the left wingers or the centrists, and therefore you have a spirited conversation on TV.
Well, and guess what? I'm about to show an example of the opposite, and I'm going to have to plead guilty to this. Now, I've never watched this show on Fox called The Five, I think it's called, but I do frequently see social media posts because they have one progressive on there. I think Jessica Tarlov. Am I saying her name right?
I think that's right.
Again, I've never watched the show, but when I see the clips of her takedowns of all the other conservatives around her are masterful. They're rooted in fact. But of course, she's not changing any of their minds. She's not changing any minds of the Fox viewers. And yet I enjoy seeing that in much the same way I'm sure Republicans enjoy seeing Scott Jennings. The difference is one's rooted in fact and the other's rooted in fiction. But I guess in some ways I'm kind of confessing that I'm glad there's somebody there calling things out. I'd rather have that than one person on there who they always have to correct because he's spewing misinformation.
Yeah, but see, this is my argument: is that if you're a news show, go find a conservative who's actually telling the truth. And I mean, you can argue for abortion. You can argue for we don't need universal health care. You can argue we need a balanced budget. We need to not spend money on X and Y and Z. Those are all legitimate opinions, and you can find conservatives to say that if you try hard enough. Instead, they keep on platforming the liars. And I think there's a concerted effort among the Republican Party to put the same old liars on the big news shows. Tom Cotton, Lindsey Graham, Mike Johnson. You see those on the Sunday news shows all the time. And I think it's because the Republicans, I don't know this because nobody will explain it to us, but I think that the Republican Party is saying, take it or leave it. This is who you get. And if the news shows would try harder to find legitimate, honest conservatives, we'd have a less toxic news environment.
Well, I think that's what they have to do is okay, fine. We can't get it in the Senate. Look in the House. We don't have them in the House. Here's somebody. Here's a leading legislator from Maryland who is speaking out about this, because there was a time, and it wasn't all that long ago, when Republicans, like Democrats, all Americans, wanted to solve problems, which meant you'd have to like build things or create programs. But now the entire philosophy of conservatism isn't to solve problems efficiently, but to actually just shrink government for the sake of shrinking government.
Right.
And
Make it
so
less efficient.
Right. So that when they're faced with things that would actually take the spending of money, you know, I know it inside it kills some of them, but they can't. The orthodoxy is you can't spend $1 more than you are right now. And that takes away any purpose whatsoever in solving problems or helping people.
Well, but Pat, it's also not just how much you're spending; it's how much you're taking in. And the big motive, I think, the number one motive of the Republican Party right now is to give giant tax cuts to rich people, because rich people will give them money for their campaigns. It's this kind of this perpetual motion machine where the rich people give Republicans big bucks, and the Republicans give big bucks back to the rich people.
So now we're getting to the point of the election where, and I'm already seeing the headlines out here of how they think things will finish. And I mean, can we be honest? Nobody knows how it's going to finish yet. So I don't know why, again, we're still talking about the race and not the stakes, but you see it in Axios, you see it in Politico, you see it in all of the media houses out here. You know, there's still enough time to talk about what's at stake, either issue by issue or, you know, democracy itself.
Right.
But they just can't quit the polls.
Oh no, it's all, it's horse race, you know, and it's also just like Axios has a horrible, cheap story up today that says leading Democrats are telling us privately that they feel that Harris is going to lose. Well, all right. And they say a growing number. Well, what's that growing number? Like they talked to 3 people yesterday and it was 2 people last week. Well, I mean, it's absurd. And also, if you know politics, Pat, people gossip in politics. That's what they do. Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure we put enough money there. I think we put too much money there. We should have campaigned there. It's all about second guessing and speculation. That's what the whole industry is about. So you can certainly write a story saying there are a lot of people who have misgivings, because they always do.
Right. I mean, that's a dog bites man headline if ever. And since we haven't picked on any headlines, let's pick on one of them from the New York Times that says, Trump flirts with the ultimate tax cut, no income taxes at all. Now, buried in the story is how the idea is mathematically impossible and economically destructive. But why a headline that just focuses on flirting with something that would be harmful instead of actually saying Trump promotes something that is harmful?
This is a great mystery to me, you know, and I used to write headlines for a living, and the New York Times headlines are way worse than their stories. If you read their stories, you kind of understand things a little bit, but their headlines are often really misleading, and they just tend to fuzz the issues. Like they tend to not blame the people who are responsible for stuff. Although I don't even know why you wrote the story they wrote the way they did, because this idea that, well, maybe we don't need any income tax. Oh, please, of course we need income tax. And the only way we wouldn't need income tax is if Trump's giant fantasy that tariffs are a tax on other countries was true. And it's not. And nobody thinks that. No experts on the right or the left think that.
No,
it's totally invented.
And here's the other one. Let's see, who did this one come from? Where it says Harris uses ex-Trump chiefs of staff remarks to paint him as unfit for office. Well, it's not Harris using the remarks that should be the headline. Right. It's that Trump's ex-chief of staff is making these remarks.
Right. And it's like, well, Harris is painting him as a fascist. No, his former longtime chief of staff and Homeland Security secretary is calling him a fascist. So is his former defense secretary. I mean, these are people who should know because they were in meetings with him. Right. And to say, well, this is a big political issue. It's not political tactic. It's a really scary fact or opinion by somebody who really should know that Trump says fascist things. That's what we should worry about. Not this is an interesting tactic.
Exactly. So that was the Wall Street Journal, by the way. Mark Jacob, appreciate it once more before the election. Have a good weekend. We'll see you later.
Talk to you later.
All right. Dan Schumacher's coming up next. You're Up North. There you are. Long time no see.
Yeah, what's happening?
You know, I'm bored. There's nothing new in the news.
Yeah, nothing new.
You know,
What are you going to do in 2 weeks?
sleep. Just sleep.
Are you going to that benefit tomorrow?
Oh, yeah, working it. Yeah.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yep. Yeah, getting there early for setup, working the first little bit of it, and then we got to do some other stuff. But yeah, it's going to be, I mean, they have really put their heart and soul into this thing.
Yeah.
So
I
I
have a
hope
lot of
it's,
people that I know. Kim got a bunch of stuff from the hotel and stuff like that, daily passes and swim passes. And so, yeah, a lot of people contributing, no doubt about it. I won't be there till like 4 o'clock. I have games tomorrow morning, and then after volleyball, I will take off and come back to Chippewa.
Okay.
I'll try to get the benefit then.
All right. Sounds good. Let's see. So we got
Vikings lost last night.
Vikings. Yeah, I got to get that.
Did you see that face mask that they didn't call?
No, I saw a headline about it.
Oh my God. How did the referee see it? It's almost like he had money on the game.
Oh, jeepers. Okay. Let's see.
It's like 35 degrees here.
45 here. All right, 10 seconds. I think everything just sounds better in the new studio in Radio Park. Even the Grateful Dead sound better. Or at least it sounds better to you, Greg, right?
Oh, yeah, baby.
and of course, Dan Schumacher is always going to think so. So glad the new studio's working out. Dan joins us from up in Ashland. How are you doing up there?
Well, it's a very crisp morning, fall morning here.
Yeah. Let me get a little steam rising off Lake Superior there.
There is not.
Okay.
There's not. I'm looking straight at the water right now, but the sun's coming up and sun's shining over across on Washburn, and it's supposed to be about a 55-degree day up here, so that's not so bad.
I bet it's just gorgeous here. We'll get to the Packers in a bit and the Bears, but let's start with the Vikings because they played last night in LA. And I missed this, but I'm looking at the headline now about a very controversial missed face mask penalty overshadowed the Rams beating the Vikings. Were you watching it live?
It was. It was blatant miss. I mean, you could see where the ref, he comes back, drops back to pass. He's getting protected in the left end, swims, comes in and reaches, and it just takes his whole mask and his whole head goes one way. And how the ref didn't see it, I mean, that would have given him a first down and got him out of the goal line situation.
But instead it was a safety and made it a 10-point margin.
Correct.
Yeah. And that's how it ended, right? 30-20 Rams over the Vikings. Let me say this much about the game. Now the Vikings were 5-0. They're now 5-2, right?
Yes.
And I'll say this much: I would always be a little hesitant to go to the West Coast. I've been to California, but that whole thing about earthquakes I just find is weird. The one thing I would go there for is that stadium, SoFi, is just gorgeous. I haven't done like any kind of a stadium tour or a ballpark tour. I've always wanted to. Mm-hmm. And most of it is baseball related, but boy, would I make a stop there. That looks like an amazing complex.
For not being, technically it's an open air stadium.
Yeah.
It's open air.
It's just kind of like a canopy over it. But that's how everything is in California there. Their malls are basically, they're always outdoor, but with this kind of canopy over the top for when it rains. But you don't need it for trapping
the stadium that I say it's kind of like a 10th wonder of the world. I'm not kidding you. It's Jerryland. Jerry.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask you of all the places where you've gone, the places where you've been in person. what's the most impressive? And is it that one? Is it
That
still
one, I would say
AT&T
that one
Stadium?
because it's so massive. I mean, you could buy a car Rolls Royce there. You could buy a fur coat there. I mean, it's like a mall built in. I mean, it's a mall built into a stadium.
Oh man!
And it's just, and there's so many people. They sell 30,000 standing room only tickets each game.
My goodness!
Oh my!
It's crazy. And I've been down on the field, and when you look to the highest point of the stadium, it looks like ants. That's how large and high, and then you've got the massive video board that goes right down the middle of the field. It is just the 10th wonder of the world. I don't know. I just, from an atmosphere standpoint, the best atmosphere in I think, which is Michigan, University of Michigan in Ann Arbor.
The big house.
The big house. It's electric there, and I've actually been on the field. I've been at games, and I mean, but as far as size and scope, Jerry World beats them all.
Wow. We had standing room only tickets for last weekend's Packer game. The friend of mine that got the tickets did not realize at the time that they were standing room only. Oh. So he was a little chagrined, but it was a great experience. Yep. And where we were, you're in the concourse basically, just, and looking over the row of seats in front of you. Mm-hmm. And the winning field goal for the Packers, it kind of came right at us in the south end zone, and everybody's cheering and it's great. And so we cheered for about 5 seconds, and then we were like the first ones out of the building. That was the nice part about standing room only, is it also meant we were standing close to the exit and could get on out of there. The Packers are in Jacksonville playing this weekend. It's a noon game, which means the pregame gets going at 10 a.m., and that includes civic media stations in Racine, Kenosha, Richland Center, and Park Falls. What are your Bears doing? They were on a bye last week.
Moved because they got moved to 325. They're playing the Commanders.
Washington,
so
gotcha.
They're going to highlight that game, and so
okay. Yeah, they flex already. They're already moving games around this weekend. So people who thought they were going to which game was it that got moved to the night game?
Wasn't it the Vikings game?
No, because it would be this coming Sunday. Somebody else has got Sunday night football.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but
it's Dallas, San Francisco. So
yeah, that's it. Yeah. That's it. Okay. Hey, getting back to the Packers, have you been following the dispute between the Green Bay Packers organization and the city of Green Bay?
I only saw a note about it last evening, and the general gist of it is from people is like, okay, we're having an argument over how much the team should be paying a fee to the city, but the team can't leave the city, but you also don't want animosity between the city and the team. So I think there's a whole lot of folks saying, guys, just work it out. But there are other people who are taking a side.
They did a press conference yesterday live. I watched it on the TV, and they had the entire city council unanimously vote and support the mayor and the justification of what they were proposing back to the Packers. So there's some heated stuff going on between the Packers and the organization and the city. So
yeah, and I'm hoping that it cooler heads prevail and they eventually figure this out. Milwaukee Bucks, by the way, they have their home opener tonight against the Chicago Bulls. Any early word on how the Bulls are going to be this year?
Hopefully competitive.
Well, that was perfect.
Competitive.
That was the perfect place to run out of time on. Dan Schumacher, thank you so much. As always, have a great weekend. Greg Bach is back for Matt and Air on Air in 2 little hours from now. I know you have this really good guest coming up, and I've lost track of who it is.
James Vanderloo.
There you go. All right. So
talking about tariffs, baby.
All righty. Thank you so much for joining us for Up North News Radio this week. I'm Pat Kreitlow. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here Monday morning, 6 a.m. Up North.